Reflexes, these are automatic responses. Most of them are in the spinal cord, but some of them are in the cranial nerves also. They are doing activities that you don't have to think about it, so it will reduce the function of the cortex of the brain, so the cortex of the brain can be involved in more complex activities. Or when you learn something, that becomes a reflex, so you don't have to think about it and you can just do that activity. Sometimes these reflexes are designed to reduce harm to the body, so removing a specific part of the body from harmful stimuli. So there is different examples of that, and usually it works as a negative feedback. You have here a reflex arc there that you have to have at least one sensory neuron and at least one motor neuron. You may also have interneurons that are connecting these two, and you have some other neurons that may go to the brain, and then they become consciously aware of the stimulus. So this is the classification of the reflexes. One is based on development. Some of them are innate. It means that the person is born with it. An example of that is that, for example, breathing is a reflex, or changing the blood pressure can be reflex. Or when the baby is born, the first hour the baby starts suckling a mother's breast. Nobody taught the baby or the newborn how to suckle the breast, and it is there. It's already a reflex there. And acquired reflex are that you learn later on. For example, you walk, for example you swim, you drive. All those things become later on. You learn those activities, and that become a reflex. Then is on the type of response. One is the somatic one. This is the conscious one, so it is the skin and the skeletal muscle is involved there. The visceral ones that are subconscious, so changing in the heart rate, changing in the secretions of the glands, respiratory rate, and blood pressure. All those things are related to the visceral reflexes. And how many neurons are there? So if it is two neurons are there, it's only one synapse, that's called the monosynaptic. Or if there are more than two neurons, that's called polysynaptic. And monosynaptics are a lot faster than polysynaptic ones. And the location that the information is processed, one is called spinal reflexes because they are located in the spinal cord, and the other one is cranial reflexes, which is processed in the brain. So let's talk about these reflexes separately. So the monosynaptic ones, you have to have one sensory and one motor, and that's why it is very fast. An example of that is called postural reflex. And here, for example, when you're sitting and when you're standing, these back muscles are contracting, and that's keeping your head, neck, and also posture properly. Also, the leg muscles and the thigh muscles are contracting, and that's why you do not fall. So if these reflexes are not working properly, then the person can have a posture like that, and that may cause back pain and neck pain and some other problems. Another example is the stretch reflex, and here for the stretch reflex it's better to talk about the muscle spindle first. Okay, so this is inside the muscle, inside the skeletal muscle. Most of the skeletal muscle is made of these fibers. These are called extrafusal. These are the muscle fibers that cause contraction of a muscle. But you may also have something else, and these are called intrafusal fibers. And the intrafusal fibers are connected to the nerves, and those nerves go to the central nervous system. So once a muscle is stretched like this, see that the muscle is stretched already, and you are hitting it with a reflex hammer, and that is hitting the tendon, so increasing the stretching of the muscle. So this intrafusal fibers are activated. The signals are sent to the brain, I mean to the spinal cord, not to the brain, to the spinal cord, and then it comes back from the spinal cord here to the intrafusal fibers, and that causes contraction of the intrafusal fibers, and also other nerves come here. It's not shown here properly. That will cause contraction of the extrafusal fibers. So when it's stretched too much, these muscles contract, and then this is the response. So the person is kicking. So here is, if you look at this area, this is the intrafusal one. So this is areas that is now stretched too much, and that's sending a sensory signal. And the cell body is located in the dorsal root ganglion. Now it goes to the posterior horn, and here is there's synapse together. So there is only one synapse, and the motor neuron, which is located in the anterior horn of the spinal cord, then it leaves through the ventral root, and that will cause contraction of the extrafusal fibers, and that will cause contraction, and the person kicks. Okay. Another one is called polysynaptic ones. It means that there is more than one synapses there, so multiple neurons are there. And a good example is called the tendon reflex. So here is the tendon here. Tendon is an area that a muscle connects to the bone. So when you are contracting a muscle, you are putting a lot of pressure on the tendon. So if this is too much pressure on the tendon, then a reflex is activated. For example, you are lifting something that is very, very heavy. There's too much pressure there, and sensory signals are sent to the spinal cord, and this is the cell body outside of CNS, and sensory information goes to the dorsal horn, and you have the interneurons here, and then it connects with the motor neuron. So here the motor neuron is inhibiting the contraction of this muscle, so reducing the damage and the pressure or tear in the tendon. And the opposite muscles are activated here, and now the person, instead of contracting or flexing the elbow, the person can extend the elbow, and then the weight will fall from your hands. So that is the main reason for that, is to prevent damage to the tendon. This is another example that's called withdrawal reflex. So here, if you're touching something really hot, or maybe something painful or sharp or something, then what happens here, the sensory signals are sent to the spinal cord. Here, this is the posterior horn of the spinal cord that processes sensory information. You have an interneuron here, and that's connected to the motor neuron in the anterior horn of the spinal cord. And then the information goes through the ventral root, goes to the muscle, cause contraction of the biceps muscle, for example, and that will cause a flexion of the elbow, and then you are removing your hand from the painful stimulus, and that is a negative feedback, so it's preventing damage to a specific part of the body, and at the same time it's inhibiting the opposite muscle. So if the triceps muscles were contracting here, in this case the elbow would have been extended, and then it would cause more damage. That's why this is inhibited. And as you can see here, the information is sent to the brain because you become consciously aware of that. But usually by the time you become consciously aware and you feel the pain, your hand is already removed from that area. It's very, very fast because it's more localized. When the time goes to the information goes to the brain, it takes time, but this is happening in the spinal cord, so it's a lot faster. And another example is called crossed extensor reflex. Okay, so for that, let's talk about this leg first. This leg is extended, the knee is extended here, and you're putting your foot on something painful, and now you want to remove your foot because that's painful. So the information is sent to the spinal cord, same idea there. So the posterior horn is processing that, and this is an interneuron that goes here in the anterior horn of the spinal cord here, and now the flexor muscles are stimulated. So these hamstring muscles cause flexion of the knee and inhibition of the quadriceps muscle. So that's why your knee is flexed here and you're removing your foot from the painful stimulus. So this is still the withdrawal reflex, like similar to this one, but something else is happening here. The information is also connected with the opposite side. So now what happens here, on the opposite side, the quadriceps muscles are stimulated. That will cause extension of the knee, and hamstring muscles are inhibited, so that's an inhibiting flexion of the knee. So this is why it keeps your balance. So the opposite leg is, or the opposite limb is extended, and it's keeping your balance. Otherwise, if both of them contract, you may fall. So this is why it's called cross extensor. So it's going to the opposite side. You see that? It goes to the opposite side. But again, it will go to the brain, because the information is processed there, and you can feel the pain in the specific area. By the way, this is the automatic reflexes. Automatic reflexes are happening in the brain, and initially when you try to learn something, for example walking or running or jumping, the brain will think about it, that which muscle should contract. As you do that more and more and more, then that is saved in the memory and a specific part of the brain, which I will talk about it later, and that becomes a reflex. So then the brain does not have to think about those reflexes. These are specific movements, and they can think about more complicated problems that are there. So the more you do an activity, you will increase the reflex against that. But the brain can inhibit a reflex, so consciously you can inhibit a reflex. And there is also Babinski reflexes there. So what happens that if this infant, so less than 1 year old, and you have a reflex hammer, so starting from the heel and go toward the toe, usually the baby or the infant will cause extension of the toes here. Okay, extension. But a normal person, more than age 1, it will cause flexion. So you see this a lot more than this one. So if you are over, if the patient is over 1, then the Babinski reflex causes flexion of the toes. Younger than 1, it causes extension of the toes. But if there is any damage, okay, in the motor tracts, in the spinal cord or higher, this will cause this reflex. Okay, so it can cause extension of the toes, which is not normal. So anybody above age 1 should not have extension of the toe with the Babinski reflex, should have this. Sometimes you may not have this reflex at all, and that's still normal. 20% of people may not have reflexes, but if you have it and it will cause extension, it may be a problem with the motor pathways. Thank you.